Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another one of our Facebook Live town halls. It's glad that you have joined us this evening for another series of updates on how this situation is rolling out, programs and other issues that are arising as we're all dealing with the effects of this global pandemic here in our communities. You've seen a record number of new programs released, of course, and we'll talk and give a few more updates on those this evening. Before we get to that, we have another solemn moment here this evening where we just got the news earlier today as an accident that occurred yesterday with some of our Canadian Forces officials and frontline personnel over in the Mediterranean. A helicopter crash there that has seen now 6 members, one who has been identified as having lost their life and 5 missing. This is part of an operation over with our NATO partners in the Mediterranean, part of an operation called Reassurance. Anytime our frontline officers are serving and out there defending Canadian values and principles and putting their lives on the line to do so, it makes us incredibly proud. But it's always very sad when we see these kinds of situations. So we're thinking of the families of all of those members of the Canadian Armed Forces and know that they're in our hearts and our prayers this evening. Let's going to just go through a quick update on how the show is going to go tonight. I'm going to step through very quickly some updates to existing programs that we've already talked about. We have a few updates, follow-ups really from last show as well that Curtis will bring us up to date on. And as you may have seen on our advertising for tonight's show, we have a very special guest. The first time that we've brought a guest onto the show, other than me and Curtis, we have the Provincial Member of Parliament, Jill Dunlop, joining us. So she's going to be doing a segment at the top end of the show. And after we do that, we'll be turning to your questions. Speaking of that, I'm going to go to Curtis now, and he's going to give you an idea of what to think about there as you hear the show, my initial thoughts, and then Jill's to put some questions up on the board that we can get to later.
Thank you, Bruce. Hello, everyone. As with our previous broadcast, we'll be holding a question and answer segment towards the end of the town hall. If you do have any questions at any point during the town hall, please add them to the comment section of the stream. We will ask that you guys keep your questions brief as possible, and please ensure that you're not including any personal information. We want to make sure that we're protecting your privacy. The town hall is being recorded, so if we are unable to get your question before the end, we will definitely follow up with you as soon as possible after the broadcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Curtis. And so let's get started. Now, there's 3 different programs I want to talk about here, 2 of which we alluded to during the last show as well. In fact, we may have alluded to all 3 of them, but just a quick thing on the wage subsidy program. That's the 75% of payroll that employers can work to apply to get to support their people either on a paid leave or even if they're working to some degree. That opened up on Monday, and as of yesterday, 60,000 employers have already applied for that program. So it seems to be going well. We are keeping tabs on any sort of gaps in that program as well, and we're hearing from some businesses where it's just not working. So that's one, we've talked about that a bit before. It is out there now and available. If anybody has any questions about how to tap into that, let us know and we'll be glad to help you with that. A new program that has just the details of which was just released this week was the new Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Benefit. Now that's a very unique program. It's supported by the province of Ontario as well and will be delivered through the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. And it's going to be a program where landlords, property owners, can essentially get a loan equal to 50% of what they would normally be getting from their tenants in the form of rental income. So they can get that 50% as a loan. It's completely forgivable if they take 25% of that rent and pay for it themselves, and then the tenant will pay the other 25%. So it's a really good program. It's going to allow small businesses that are leasing space from their landlords to cut down on their fixed costs. They do have to agree to make sure that landlord would have to agree that there's no evictions during this period of time, which runs from April through to June. So a very good program, and I hope people take that one up. As to the date as to when that's going to be available, expect in a matter of 10 days to 2 weeks, but CMHC will be the access point for that one. Now, a few more details we talked about last week, the new benefit for students that just went through the House of Commons yesterday, and I think has probably received royal assent today in the Senate. Not too much new to add there, although the student benefit, this is the $1,250 a month that post-secondary students, anybody attending college, university, including recent graduates, if they just graduated after December of 2019, they're eligible for this as well. All of this is to help students get normally there would be lots of summer jobs around for students to make some extra money so they can start their university program in the fall. But now with the COVID-19 restrictions in place and many of those businesses just not operating, it's that much more difficult. So there is a premise in this program that students still need to be available for work. And a matter of fact, they'll need to register with the Canada Job Bank in order to make sure that they can be eligible for the program. So that's coming up really quickly. And as far as access to that, they'll need to apply and make sure that they have, students will need to have the My CRA account all set up and ready to go, and that's something that they can do online very quickly. One other element to that, and I mentioned this I think last week as well, the student grant. If another option for students would be if they want to put some volunteer time in their community, helping the great efforts that are going on by community organizations, they can volunteer hours and earn up to $55,000 from the Government of Canada through a student grant in return for those volunteer hours. And we'll have a couple more thoughts on that from Curtis momentarily. One of the things we chatted about last week was the provision, and it actually came up in the questions. How do we make sure that we're getting access to personal protective equipment? And this is especially for all frontline essential workers. We've done some digging into that, and there's literally no less than 20 different local suppliers here in Simcoe County that are retooling and feeding into that supply chain to get more PPE available. Minister Anand, that's our Public Services and Procurement Minister, has indicated that Canada is really pursuing large quantities of PPE, mostly for the healthcare sector, and that's being distributed through the provinces. If you're in a bind where you need to get access to PPE and are having difficulty getting it for your workforce, we're going to put a few other links up on our website and on the Facebook page. But companies like 3M Canada, Swish, that distributes cleaning materials and cleaning supplies, including two organizations in Collingwood that produce spirits usually, Heretic and Georgian Bay Spirit Company, are doing and manufacturing hand sanitizer in quantities that are suitable for individual use. So there's some options, and we'll put those up on the site. Now we're going to whip over to Curtis here momentarily, and he's a couple little updates just in terms of the volunteer options that people might be looking at for the summer.
Thank you, Bruce. So typically we would advise anybody who's looking to volunteer to reach out to two organizations primarily within the riding, Community Reach on the west end, and then Information Aurelia on the east end. Obviously, currently they are not considered essential operations, so they are closed down during this time. As of right now, within the community, we do know the Canadian Red Cross is seeking volunteers. They're based out of Barrie and Midland. And then as well, Canada.ca, they put together a new site for how people can help. It's called COVID-19, How You Can Make a Difference. So this is providing different options and available volunteer opportunities for students and others to get involved. And this relates back to what Bruce mentioned about the grant program to help provide additional funds for their tuition in the fall. And additionally, on the how you can make a different site. There is a section on agriculture and agri-food sector. They are in need of workers, so definitely if someone is available to help out with that, definitely get involved. We will definitely put all of this information up on the website after the broadcast, and then any information we get coming into us throughout the upcoming time, we will also get that up on social media and the website.
Thanks very much for that, Curtis. And now we're going to go over to our guest. Now, you'll know Jill Dunlop. She's the MPP here for Simcoe North, but she's also the Associate Minister for Children and Women's Issues in the province of Ontario. The province, of course, has a critical role in not only managing, but, quite honestly, provinces take the lead on issues around healthcare. So the province has, we've seen Premier Ford literally daily and his crew talking about important information and leading in ways that will help people to get through this crisis as well. So we've asked Jill to come on the call with us tonight. Good evening, Jill. Great to have you on the call. And you've got a few thoughts for us on this COVID-19 health emergency that we're all getting through, and we're delighted to have you here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for having me here. And there's definitely lots to talk about when it comes to COVID. Bruce, I'd like to thank you for hosting this. I know this is your third week, and there's been some growing pains that have come along with it, but I'm happy to be here on week 3. So let's hope that we get through this. I will apologize now. I live out in the country, so my internet may not be the best. I'm hotspotting off of my phone tonight. So hopefully I keep a constant connection. But I just want to hope everyone is well in the community. I know we're doing our part to stay home, stay safe, and practice the social distancing and hand washing and all those things that are expected of us and by our public health units. I'd also like to thank all of our frontline workers, whether you're a nurse, a PSW, a grocery store worker, a corrections officer, the garbage man pickup. It's all crucial during this time, and we all thank you, and you're essential to us during these times and always. Kind of going off what Bruce was talking about with the Ontario Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Program, the province is very happy to be part of that program. And I can tell you at our constituency office, I'd say number one concerns that we're having as far as questions go are from small businesses. So the government, the provincial government is really looking at where are those gaps and how can we also help. But it's really crucial, the work that's being done between the federal government and the provincial government, and as well as our municipal governments as well. There's information coming out so quickly every day that it's crucial that we're staying connected and we're also getting that information out to the public. And I can tell you that my constituent office may be closed to walk-in visitors now, but we are answering the phones and answering emails and keeping the website up to date. So there's always good information there for you on these daily announcements. One thing that was also mentioned, I see Edward Evans had a question about residential rents. Minister Clark, our Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, has reached out to the federal government to look at ways to support residential landlords as well. And we encourage those who can pay their rent to continue to do so, but we're also looking at ways to how we can be working with the federal government to support residential rents. This past weekend, we announced temporary pandemic pay to frontline workers, and this is to recognize their dedication, the long hours that they're putting in, and their increased risk of working to contain the outbreak of COVID-19. So this is a $4 an hour increase. To name a few of those workers, they include staff in long-term care and retirement homes, emergency shelters, supportive housing, social services and congregate care settings, such as group homes, corrections institutions and youth justice, paramedics, and those providing home and community care. In addition, those employees working over 100 hours per month will receive a lump sum payments of $250 per month for the next 4 months. This week, we based on the positive modeling results that we are continuing to have from our Chief Medical Officer of Health, Premier Ford released the framework for opening the economy. So this is not a calendar, but just a framework in how we will move forward. And it sets the criteria that medical experts will use to advise the government as we are able to start moving forward and lessening the emergency measures in place. So this will obviously be a very gradual opening to the economy. The framework includes a stage-by-stage approach. that ensures the appropriate measurements are in place so workers can open safely. Each 2 to 4 week stage will be carefully monitored and assessed depending on any changes of the outbreak. And continued protection for the vulnerable populations must be in place through each stage, continued physical distancing and continual hand washing. The Chief Medical Officer of Health, after each 2 to 4 week period, may advise to reapply or tighten certain public health measures, maintain the status quo, or progress to the next stage. Today, we also saw our Minister of Health, Minister Monty McNaughton, announce specific guidelines to numerous sectors, and this will help to assist employers in their responsibility to provide safe and guidelines offer practical advice to help businesses operate safely in this new environment. And we'll also be hiring 58 new inspectors to help with this transition. So we're looking to help businesses in, will they be needing PPEs for their staff, having plexiglass shields in place, spacing of customers and lineups, and reductions in shifts to maintain social distancing around employees. Minister of Finance, Mr. Rod Phillips, also announced the Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee, which is going to start planning for the next phase of its response to the COVID-19 crisis, and will work to identify when and how the government can help to create the conditions to restart Ontario's economy. So how can you get involved? I will be doing MPP consultations in the riding in many different sectors. If you're in the restaurant business, if you're in manufacturing, if you're in retail, we'll be looking to host roundtables, obviously via Zoom or a video conference style, but looking to for our area to give feedback on your specific sector and how we can get the economy moving again. I wish the health and safety of all Ontarians is our #1 priority, but we're now looking to start, how do we reopen the province and our economy at a slow, gradual phase while maintaining the social distancing and health and safety protocol in place.
I just wanted to maybe, and the report is excellent, by the way, and I applaud the province for continuing to stay on top of this and look forward to see how gradually the economy can open up, and it's good to see the province is paying close attention to that. Before we get to our viewers' questions, one of the things that we hear about quite often, and I know this is more in the province's area than it is in mine, but we get a lot of calls from people, cottagers. We've had a question even on one of these shows about, is it okay to go fishing? Can I take my kayak out? What's the current restrictions or recommendations around how people should govern their sort of outdoor activities, especially as the temperatures start to come up, as they're finally doing this week?
Well, I like the third comment, going to the cottage. I'll start with. So that has been something that's been on our minds right from the beginning. I know, being in cottage country, that was a concern for residents who reside here as our permanent residents, is having people coming up to their cottage and how that was going to affect the food supply chain in our grocery stores, but also the possible increased burden on our healthcare system. We love tourists coming up. We love them in the summer when we're prepared for them. So we're not always at this time of the year, nor during a pandemic and the increased usage or possible usage of the hospital. So the Premier has heard from many MPPs, because we're not the only cottage country in the province. So he has continued to make recommendations, as has the Prime Minister, to please stay in your primary residence. We still see it happening, but we're continuing. Please stay in your primary residence at this time. Boating is an option if you are able to find a boat ramp at this time. So municipally owned boat ramps continue to stay closed, as do marinas. So that would be, if you can find a boat launch, I guess that's something you can do, but there's not many in the area that already municipally functioned. Fishing has been allowed. Again, it would have to be shoreline unless you have access to a boat. I know I've heard concerns from local residents about, hoping that people from the city aren't, again, coming up to this area to choose to fish along our shorelines. That being said, if you're social distancing in place, you are able to fish at this time.
Now I'm hearing that we might be getting some problems with sound, a little bit of feedback from some of our viewers when I'm talking. So it could be that we're getting a bit of repeating at your end, Jill. So we'll try and modulate that as best we can from this end, but we'll do our best and try not to be both talking at the same time, and we'll do what we can to. It's one of these new things that we're learning with Facebook Live. So we're going to go to our questions, and the first question is from Tim. This may be for you, Jill. He's asking if there's any eviction protection for commercial tenants who are unable to afford their rent, but their landlords are still expecting payment, and that landlord may choose not to apply for the commercial rent assistance. So is there any protection, or are landlords unable, or should they be unable at this point to go ahead with evictions?
Well, I guess I'd be concerned about why your landlord wasn't applying for the commercial rent assistance program. So as you mentioned earlier, it's being administered through Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. So I would definitely, reach out to them for more information. I don't know. I would hope that there's good communication open with your landlord to have that discussion, because it's there to support both the tenant and the landlord too. I don't believe there's any protection in place at this time. I think it was hoping that landlord and tenant would both benefit from this system. So I think it would be worth reaching out to CMHC and also having the discussion with your landlord.
Great, and thanks for that question, Tim, and thanks, Jill. Now, Brian asks, is there any help coming for small businesses like his that don't necessarily qualify for the existing programs? And I would say, Brian, we are hearing that as well from some of maybe you, for example, for the emergency business account, the $40,000 loan. If you didn't have your payroll between $20,000 and $1.5 million, you don't qualify for that. The government has worked with the regional development agencies as well as our local CFDCs, the Community Futures organizations, and they will be soon rolling out some additional program dollars for businesses for which the existing programs do not fit. So stand by on that. I think the last we heard from Community Futures, it may still be a few days before we see what those programs look like. And now Linda asks, this is to Jill. Jill, can you see that up there on your chat there from Linda? So I'll let you go ahead on that one. Okay, so Linda is asking or commenting that according to, can everybody else see this question? Or should I? Yeah, sorry. It's probably on the post, right? I guess commenting on that, the CRB is in place right now for those people who are without employment. If it's somebody who has currently lost their job too, so I'd say that would be a program that those women should be participating in. And if it's, I'm not sure if their job transitioning to after the pandemic is over, or jobs that were completely lost. There's lost jobs. There's, depending what sectors they're looking into, there is, retraining programs. I know my specific ministry funds programs for women going into trades. It's called the Women's Economic Support Program. So there's programs like that in place that will help women get back into the workforce. But I would say right now it would be important to apply for that sort of funding at this time. Great. And we have a question from Jane. She's asking about whether there will be additional help coming for seniors, especially those that are confined to home, where mobility is an issue. And an excellent question. We know in our community, there's lots of people who are at levels of fragility and need some extra support in the community. So one of the things the federal and provincial governments are working together on is getting dollars to organizations like Red Cross, United Way, to make sure that they have more resources to get things like food and supplies and important needs taken directly out to seniors that are in need. So I would certainly encourage you, Jane, to give us a shout or contact Red Cross or United Way directly as well. And in addition to those two organizations, our community foundations, both in Orillia and in Huronia, it's in Midland Penetanguishene, that goes by Huronia Community Foundation. They'll be having some supports for people with those needs as well. Now we have a question from, oh yeah, go ahead, Jill, jump in.
There was just this past week, there was an announcement made for $11 million for organizations who help to feed seniors at home and those less fortunate. So I know some of the programs are in the Orillia area, for example. Our cottage is, it's called a Feed a Friend, Feed Families program. And I helped deliver meals the other day. And you know, again, you can look on to contact my office for more information on programs like that. But I know there are a lot of opportunities out there for people to look into that are helping those less fortunate.
That's great. And I think the next one is maybe for you, Jill. It's from Ellen. Do you want to take that one?
Oh, Ellen and landscapers, this has been a tough one. I understand. So I know myself and Mayor Clark in Orillia have recently been talking about this because if you look at the essential list, landscaping or land work, I should say, yard work, is essential if it is necessary for whether that be ticks or some sort of bugs or allergens. So if you feel that it is strictly necessary, then it can be done at this time. But again, I really, you know, it's tough to say. If it's strictly necessary, that it can be done. I would suggest if you want to reach out to my office and discuss it, we'd be happy to talk a bit more.
Great. And a question from Shona, and she's asking, where do people go to find information on the pandemic pay? Now, I'm not sure what she might be meaning there. I think that may be the extra dollars that the federal government will provide to any frontline, well, essential workers, and that's essential workers is going to be defined by the province. So Jill might have a comment on that. But if they're earning less than $2,500 per month, the federal government will add an extra $1,000. That program is yet to open up, and I'm saying that because if Curtis is listening in on this, he may be able to tell me something different there. This has constantly been a moving target, so we're doing our best to keep up. But Jill, anything on in terms of how the province is going to define what types of jobs will be eligible for that extra $1,000?
If you go to the, I think Shona's asking about the emergency pandemic pay. So if you go to everything is actually located at the ontario.ca/coronavirus on the website, and you can look for it there, and it will tell you who qualifies for it, who doesn't, and information on that program.
Yeah, great question.
Also, probably a link also on my website too, if you want to look there.
Great. Question from Brad. What about commercial mortgage relief? Well, there's no sort of specific program for mortgage holders to provide relief. We've heard clearly from the banking sector, and I should say that Canada's commercial banks and even credit unions are well looked to help out in this effort right across the country. The Bank of Canada and the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has taken a lot of book debt off the hands of the banks so that they will have more room for just this kind of thing. So I would recommend that you certainly have that conversation with your commercial lender and see what kind of products they might have to help you out with mortgage relief. Barbara is asking your outdoor fire ban in the province. Jill, do you want to take that one? Anything on outdoor fire bans?
Yeah, so it is a province-wide fire ban. You'll find in the beginning, a couple of the municipalities started to put a fire ban in place, and then the province made an emergency order to make it province-wide. So that kind of takes the onus off of each municipality and wondering, who's doing what and is the ban here, there, or where. This was put in place ahead of time because we do have a forest fire season approaching, and the statistics show that 50% of fires are started by humans. And the last thing we need is frontline workers out there having to fight fires caused by humans at this time. So we just made the decision to make it a province-wide fire ban. So yes, with the nice weather coming and people wanting to have a fire and doing yard work and et cetera, no fires at this time.
Okay, thank you. And Susan is asking a similar relating to parks as well. Since parks are closed and the Trent system, the Trent Severn Waterway is closed in terms of its operational side, but does that mean it's off limits for boating? So it kind of ties back to Jill's earlier comments about boating. If you're a shoreline owner and you have a boat or kayak, I mean, there's no real restriction on you getting out on the waterways, but there are limits on some of the access points, the townships and others, like on public launch ramps, that sort of thing. They're trying to avoid any kind of congregation of people trying to use those public facilities. So is there no access? That wouldn't be quite accurate, but it's certainly limited access for boating, at least for the time being, until the province we see that after a 4-week period of lower cases and the province starts back to its opening up plan. Margaret asks, how many people do you believe that have not been tested are still walking around? I'd have to say, Margaret, that's a tough one for anyone to sort of calculate, other than the health experts that are really much seized with the whole idea of testing as many as they can. And I've heard recently that daily testing is certainly meeting objectives at this point. Would that be accurate, Jill?
Yes, I think the latest number I heard today was just around 13,000, and the Premier was hoping for about 14,000. So obviously we've seen an increase in the testing go up in the past month, and having that capacity to not only test people, but also to read those results. But with that also comes the case contact follow-up. So if you have somebody who's tested positive, then the public health unit is looking to who has that person come in contact, where are you at the grocery store, were you at the pharmacy, what family members were you with? So following up and then testing those people as well. So, we saw an increase in the number of cases, which made sense when you started testing more and more people. So, we'll continue to do that. And, as the capacity builds, be able to continue that case contact as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And Shauna asks, do I anticipate an increase in the corporate tax or increase to the GST to pay for all this bailout money? Well, I guess that's a question that we'll be able to shed more light on when we're in the recovery period from this pandemic restrictions on the economy. We just heard today, I think the parliamentary budget officer tagged that this year's deficit at something around $250 billion. That's an enormous amount of money for 1 year. It's almost equivalent to sort of 1 year's whole expense budget. So it's a monumental task. Having said that, I do think we, as a country, we weren't in too bad of shape going into this pandemic, but I think it would be, we would have to believe that post this economic restrictions that we're all experiencing and the income support programs that are needed to get people through it, that we aren't going to have some kind of additional costs and taxation or other sacrifices that we're going to have to make when this is all over. And Stephen is asking, when will the CRB or the emergency wage subsidy end? So the emergency response benefit is on track to go through until mid-July. And the wage subsidy at this stage is slated to end on June 6th. So depending on where we sit at that time, the government, I expect, will either finish those programs, and if more people get back to work, we'll see what happens after that.
I think to that point too, Bruce, that I was going to say to that point, I think that when a lot of the programs were announced or as they've been announced, we've been just tracking to see kind of where we're headed and not knowing where that would be. And as we're talking about opening up the economy and getting people back to work, is it going to take longer? Are we going to be there sooner? And continue with the social distancing and public health measures? Are we able to continue on that trajectory to getting the economy open and people back to work? So I think a lot of that, these programs get announced, they're all kind of dependent on where this takes us.
Now, Don has a good question here. Will there be support for seasonal businesses that lose their entire year due to social distancing? Again, a difficult one to answer at this point. Jill, I don't know if you had anything to add at this one, especially if these programs are slated to end.
Yeah, I know we're talking about seasonal businesses and things like festivals too, that, social distancing is going to cause those to be canceled are, so important for our economy and for those business owners too. So I think it's, Don, I'd love to know more about what your business is and if you are able to be a part of my recovery committee and bring your voice to the table, and what can we be doing as government to help fill those gaps, and what can we be doing to support and get the economy back on track?
Yeah, I think that really is the key here. I mean, these are all temporary measures now, but it really underlines why we've got to work to find a way to reopen the economy and live with COVID-19. So that gets back to our social distancing and hand washing and other measures that maybe we can get some of these many hopefully working again, but with some modifications in place that will still keep people safe. No, we have one from Oscar Variety, and they're asking, with a lot of the businesses only using debit or credit now, will there be any relief for those who have an increase of use? There's a charge per use every time you go over your plan, and we have quite a few elderly customers voice concern. Now, I'm not sure, are we talking about data usage there? I'm not sure what that might mean. It's not very clear on that. Maybe that's something we'll have to get back to Oscar's Variety on, or Curtis, if you can jump in, Jill, if you can.
I was going to say, I think it's the number of times you use your card. Some plans allow you so many transactions per month. So if that's what it is, I think that, banks didn't have a problem increasing that tap amount at the cash register. So
I see.
I would hope that they would also consider looking at that too for packages, because as you say, only use debit and credit right now, that hopefully banks would look at not putting that extra usage on people's bills this time, but I don't know.
So the extra number of transactions they might have on their credit card, in other words, I can see that. So again, it's worth a conversation with the lenders as well. I know that they're in the mood to try and keep their customers. And so these additional surcharges, like many other organizations have done, would like to see them go away. Now, Janet asks, this is one really for Jill, I think, asking about Premier Ford. So Jill, do you want to take that one?
Oh, Janet, I hope we open garden centers soon, especially with the weather coming and it's been nice and warm. I know our avid gardeners want to get out and get started. And, as the Premier did say, it's good for people's mental health. We've been cooped up now for the past 7 weeks it is now. So I can only, again, say stay tuned. But as you've seen with the framework that we put out this week, with the measures that the Minister of Labour put in place today, you can see that things are now on a positive track forward, and things like garden centers, we're hoping will be on that kind of first wave when we start lifting some of these measures. So stay tuned, and we'll be gardening soon.
Can't come soon enough. We got to get going. Yvette has another question similar to the one from Oscar's Variety. It's around credit card companies and the rates and charges that they're putting on their various transactions, processing charges for their clients, this kind of thing. Is there any relief to try and save customers a little bit on that? And I without really talking to your credit card company or the bank that you're using, it would be really hard for us to answer on that one. I will say one of the standby responses that we are always mindful to tell our constituents there is a lot of different options out there for credit products for the most part. So shop that around, and if you don't get a good product that suits you at the bank you've got now, then look somewhere else because there's some other options out there for you. I don't know, Jill, did you have anything else on that particular issue?
No, I agree. It's kind of like the debit card usage transactions. So, I've heard this from many people too, looking to credit card companies to lower their rates. It's difficult enough at this time to then have a high interest rate on your credit card. So, I agree with you, Bruce. Like I would shop around or talk to your bank.
I should have mentioned earlier on, si vous avez une question en français, nous allons recevoir vos questions en français aussi, et essayer pour répondre dans la même langue. We've got a few minutes left here, probably 5 minutes or so, and then we'll try to go to wrap up. Dawn is asking one about culture and heritage grants. Dawn, you're right. So there's about $500 million was announced for artists, athletes, and those that are working in culture or heritage type organizations. That's going to be handled all through Heritage Canada. That's not open and available on their website just yet, but it will be fairly soon. So keep an eye on the Heritage Canada website. And Lindsay is asking, are there any discussions to help people who sit just above the CERB eligibility? That's probably the $1,000 per month, but are still struggling giving the added expense. At this point, I would say, Lindsay, that your people with CERB, you are allowed to earn up to $1,000 a month, and that still makes you qualified to get the CERB up to $2,000. But once you go over that $1,000 a month, you essentially aren't going to have CERB available to you. So I would encourage. I do think it's a good discussion to have with your employer about maybe getting sufficient hours that will allow you to help out through this period of time. Jill, any thoughts on that yourself? You may have some other thoughts on that from the province's end.
Not at this time. I'd agree with your comments on that, Bruce, to look at working with your employer for the chance of changing the hours to suit the program, but nothing else to add right now.
So it turns out that was our last question. I must say, I compliment all of our questioners here tonight. You covered a good range of topics and some that we haven't seen before, so really good. Glad that you've chimed in this evening. And Jill, any closing thoughts before we wrap up the show tonight? Great to have you on, by the way, and I think we're both involved with fielding these kinds of questions for our constituents, so I hope this has been helpful for our audience tonight.
No, this is great. I know Bruce and I have been participating weekly in calls with our local chambers and the hospitals. So it's good to continue to get the information out to another crowd of people that may not necessarily be part of that. So as I mentioned, my offices are closed to walk-in visitors, but please, if you have any questions, reach out. I do have one person working in each office, but the numbers are also forwarded to cell phones if they're not there. So somebody will be there to answer your question or email as well. So please reach out. Our website is kept up to date too for any information. As I said, there's information coming at us every single day, and continue to watch the daily press conferences. It's great up-to-date information coming from the Prime Minister and the federal government, the Premier and the province. It's been a great for Bruce and I having an opportunity to get together and share this information. So thank you for having me on your show tonight.
That's great. All the best, and
I
we'll,
hope
we'll,
everybody
we'll probably
stays
see
healthy and
you by
stays
video conference sometime tomorrow. Matter of fact, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
around 9 o'clock, if I recall.
And the 7:30 one
Oh,
too.
7:30. Yes, you're right. Yes, there's another one at 7:30. So we'll
Right,
get
Colin.
a
Thank
short
you.
sleep tonight, and then away we go. Look, and in the same way, my offices, well, we're closed to the public right now. We certainly are taking your calls and emails and doing the very best we can to keep up. They're fairly high volume right now because well, Service Canada offices are closed, so we're seeing some of that spill over. But I want to thank, obviously, the Associate Minister for joining me this evening. I want to thank Dave Dalrymple, our show director, and also Curtis. Curtis is still on the screen over there somewhere? There he is. Very good. Curtis was helping out tonight. And just want to close by thanking again all of the amazing workers that are keeping our grocery stores stocked and our communities running the way they do. So enjoy your evening and enjoy the weekend ahead. We'll look forward to seeing you back here in a week's time, May 7th, 7 p.m. Have a good night.